Well, well, well. If it isn't you, a person. How you doing? Doing well, I hope. Isn't it a very pretty sunrise sets thing? I think it's very pretty. Look at all the lighting and all the prettiness. And I have this very pretty shield, which helps the lighting even more. And then if I go down like this, you can see all my pretty features. And that I have a sword. Isn't that great? Hey, you want to see something cool? Here, let me show you. This is an ancient technique I've learned. Sometimes you gotta make noise, but that helps stretches out your legs so that you can do more jumping and cool things like that. And you can also like run around like a crazy cat. You know what I mean, Jimmy Dean? You can go whoosh, wata. But it's mostly so that when you jump down things, you don't um, break anything because it stretches out your legs so that your legs become more powerful. And since your legs are more powerful, you can take the crushing weight of gravity and things like that. You know what I mean? Whoop. You can take the crushing weight of gravity because otherwise you got them linguini legs, and everybody knows what happens when you got linguini legs. It ain't good for you. Not for dropping. Let me tell you, you got linguini legs, you're dropping because you know linguini is very moist once you start to cook it. And then the truth is, if you have linguine legs and the sauce, so some saucy linguine legs, man, it just ain't gonna work out for you. I'm just telling you. Look, I'm not trying to discourage you from getting your pasta on. I'm just telling you that you got to be careful with them linguine legs, man. That's all. Sometimes you gotta get them linguine sausages. You want to strengthen your linguine legs? You get them sausages. But I've been running around in this game for a little while now, and this is actually on my second account now. Because in the other account, I was always using them cheat engines to mess around and to do some fun stuff and things like that. But it got the banded. So this is just another reminder for all you would-be hacksmen out there. Remember, don't go online with your cheats. I think I must have accidentally gone, or no, well, I think what it was is I didn't launch it without the anti-cheat thing, or with because you can turn off the easy anti-cheat thing. And I think I gave myself an item or something. Well, it could have been that, or I think I may have given myself a bugged item and didn't get rid of it. So when I went back online, just messing around and doing my thing, I think it detected that and kicked me off so that I couldn't ruin the experience for the people. I mean, imagine what if you ran for this sword right here, but you knew that people were in their own game running around and doing like cheats and stuff. What would you do then? Exactals. You'd probably delete the game completely. I mean, I would hope you wouldn't do that because that sounds very silly. But maybe you would. I don't know. I don't know you, man. Maybe you and me approach things different, you know what I mean? But recently, I've been talking to some folks online. There was one when I talked to a little bit in YouTube comments, and then there was another that I talked to on a website, on a forums, the religious forums type.com place. And I was talking to him about like my whole idea of like unity and like how like I think basically all manifestations of the divine are in a sense connected and part of the same greater notion of divinity. But the thing was, I think people were misunderstanding what I was saying a little bit. I think they thought I was trying to say that every single well, okay, in one conversation I could just kind of tell that it probably wasn't gonna go anywhere. Like I got into a YouTube comment type conversation, but pretty quickly on, I was just like, I don't feel like this is probably gonna go anywhere. So then I just tried to, just be like, okay, look, man, I'm just gonna disagree, or we're just gonna agree to disagree here, because I mean, what are you supposed to do? Every single time you meet somebody and you disagree with them, are you supposed to sit there and like treat it like debate club and like try to get them onto your side? I don't really feel like that's typically something that I really want to do. I find that in a lot of cases, when it comes to people's beliefs, it's not even. I'm not terribly concerned what other people believe, you know? Like, I mean, I'm interested to learn about it. I'm interested to know, like, what other people believe and why they believe what they believe. I'm interested to know, you know, like, I want to learn about the local beliefs and I want to respect other people's religions and things like that. And I think you can respect other people's religions while you're having your own beliefs. I mean, my personal belief is simply that I think the divine is a greater category that transcends all of our notions of God, right? Like it transcends any singular notion of God, whether you're talking about that God in like the form of like Odin, Allah, or you know any of those things. I think that these are just like shorthand we use to communicate to each other about these really big ideas. I don't think that that's like like I think the stories about gods and the stories we tell each other are just useful shorthand. I don't think that they encompass the whole value of it. So there was this video that was about like how we got from Yahweh the like original conception from like the Israelite folks and like in Canaanite religion, and how it developed into like this world spanning deity. It's a very interesting video by Esoterica. I might link it down below and maybe you can check it out if you're interested in that sort of thing. But it was talking about, like the whole concept that basically like Yahweh was kind of this like warrior god and like kind of a storm god that over time got mixed with like the conception of that deity got mixed with another deity, El, and like it kind of fundamentally changed the way people look at that entity. And it's very interesting, I think. But I made a comment where I just that, great video, and I kind of put my idea out there that I thought that basically all of these divines are basically just ways we personify, or like all these different kinds of deities are just ways we try to personify the divine and try to understand it, and that in some sense they're all basically kind of the same. I said something like Brahma and Shiva, or like I want to say I maybe used Odin or Thor or oh god, or a variety of other entities. And my thought was just I thought I made it somewhat clear, but I think there was one person who commented on my comment. I don't remember exactly what they said at first, so I'm not going to try and say. Oh, well, arrow. They said arrow. That's what they said. Oh, man. I don't know. It's glass. Very. But they said that they didn't agree, and that all these entities, each like all these names I was using, will have these very specific cases for their use and stuff like that. And I just found that it's kind of difficult to like in a short thing like YouTube comment sections. It's kind of difficult to really get into complex theological discussion, and I kind of started to try and explain myself a little bit better, but I just don't really think. At a certain point, I was just like, "Oh, what am I doing? What am I doing here?" So let's just. I don't think this is really the place for it, and it kind of already seemed like they maybe misconstrued what I said. Not intentionally, obviously, but it kind of seemed like maybe the way I phrased it wasn't the most appropriate. I don't know. It's interesting to think about. I mean, because people can, disagree on things like that, and often people will come to very radically different positions. But it got me thinking about like the interesting thing is that a lot of our conception of the divine in each individual. Oh, hello. In each individual culture can be, you know, like radically, oh man, can be radically different and can often, um, just from culture to culture can often involve series of beliefs that are possibly mutually exclusive and things like that. So for instance, like if your idea of a divinity is very specifically like a very local type of thing, then you know maybe me saying something like, well, that I also think that that's in some sense a representation of this divine greater divine being that we might call like Brahmin or whatever. You might say that's a little silly or that it doesn't make sense to you, and I'm willing to admit that that's a religious belief. That's not like a like if we just wanted to keep it completely academic and I wasn't talking about what my personal beliefs were, I would just say that these are various different entities and various different representations that are based, you know, on culture. My personal religious belief is that all of these different representations and things are humans attempting to explain their connection with divinity. And I mean that not just in the sense of like belief, but also like there is this greater thing out there that is divinity, or you know, I call it the divine or whatever, that we all connect to in one way or another, and we tend to express it in ways that make sense to us, in ways that you know we can justify to ourselves. And you know, depending on our culture, depending on like where we are spiritually and mentally at the time, we can personify those in different ways. If you live in like a kind of like semi-nomadic, maybe warrior kind of culture, your conception of the divine or the way that you would probably understand the divine is probably going to be different than me, a, you know, non-nomadic creature which walks or I mean, I guess I kind of am nomadic in the sense that I travel from planet to planet sometimes. But you know, like it's much different. My conception of God is informed not just by my own culture, but it's also uh formed by the amount of information I've taken in. Like, you know, I have books from a wide variety of different religious sources and talking about a wide variety of different topics. And I also have my own personal experiences. I have my own mystical experiences that I've had that all point me to very specifically the idea that these are all connected and that these are all our attempts to interpret a much something that is probably far too vast for us to understand. And that's also why sometimes you break it down into smaller parts as well. Maybe you break it down into smaller divinities. Maybe it's entirely cultural, where like your personal conception of the divine or like a culture's conception of the divine doesn't even really work outside of its own cultural context. Like if you have a god that is like very important to you, but it's only important to you because it like controls a specific river, or because you know like you have this manifestation, or you think that like the river is a manifestation of it, and you like you bathe in the river or whatever, and you think that like connects you to things or whatever, you know, that like connects you to the divine, or that's like important, so you have to pray to placate it. Like that conception of the divine is very localized. If you took it out, oh my, there's a lot of pups. Like if you, oh, you have a lot more health than I thought you would. But like if you really, I don't really seem like they're gonna chase after me. I shouldn't. I don't feel I like fighting them. But like your conception will be different, or like you know, sometimes it's very influenced by the culture and things like Santa Morta. Morte. Morta? I want to say Santa Morte. I could be slightly wrong on that. Forgive me, my Spanish isn't very good. But you know, that's a very specific like saint of like death in like Latin America and like Mexico and places like that. I would, if I saw that, I would still say that that's still, you know, like that's still the divine. That's still, you know, something that, wow. That's kind of funny. I think I'm a little bit. I kind of ran past all this stuff because I was just running through and getting items. I think I ran past the area I'm supposed to, but that's fine. I will maybe back up a little bit here and go. Try to think. Where's the? Oh, I think the Mariner is like right around here. This is gonna go fight that boss. But no, I think that you can see that too, or like you know, certain Hindu deities are really connected to places in India, whereas you know my own worship of them isn't gonna really like the places in India don't really matter very much. You know, like I think that the divine is completely transcendent beyond all these things, and these are just things that we use. They're just tools, right? But I think something about that interpretation. Talking to a couple people, I was specifically talking to someone who identifies as a polytheist and is very into like you know their own kind of paganism. I'm not. I think I don't know if they. I think they were eclectic. I think that they had various different deities they worship from a variety of pantheons, but I don't know for. I'm not 100% sure. But, you know, like they were talking about how, for instance, certain monotheists would use it's kind of similar language, like the idea of like unity or like all of these concepts being like part of the one greater concept, and they would kind of use that to you know, undermine the polytheists. Now, of course, that's not my intention. My intention isn't to undermine anybody. My intention is simply like I've had. Okay, I was gonna say. I was like, where do you go? Come, my friend banished knight and I want to we want to have a conversation. Wait, what? Wait, where did the Mariner person actually go? Hello, Mariner. I would like to smack a you, please. Oh, there they are. Come, friend. Yeah, you can kind of tell I'm a little underleveled for this area just because of how little damage I'm doing. That's fine. This boss isn't very hard, so we'll just... Oh, wow. I gotta be careful. I'm like trying to talk and stuff, so I'm not paying as much attention to the boss and like the enemies as I should be. But you know, I think that that stuff's very important and very interesting to consider. You know, like because you know, in my own conception of the divine, I would argue, for instance, oops, that you know. If you wanted to worship the divine as multiple entities, or if you kept to it strictly as one thing, like I think you could do that. And I think that each of these representations is equally valid. You know, like it's not like any one representation is like the true representation. I mean, part of the beauty of it is that there's all these different representations and there's all these different manifestations that we can call upon that, you know, can benefit us in our own unique ways. Like, you know, maybe as an example, maybe like the figure of Christ isn't just super, oop, maybe just isn't like super useful to you in your life, or, you know, maybe some other specific um um way you imagine the divine. Maybe it's entirely independent. Maybe you connect with, you know, maybe your ancestors. There's all kinds of ways to do it, man. I don't think that there's any one way to do it that's correct. I mean, now what I will say is important is that when you're talking in a purely academic sense, you should try to keep your beliefs to yourself as much as possible. So, for instance, like if I was talking about the Egyptian deities, I wouldn't talk about them as if they're like, yeah, you know, man, these like representations of the divine. If we're talking like in a purely academic type sense, what I would say that this is, you know, we would look at like how did the people, oh, did my night guy die? That's unfortunate. Like, how did the people around at the time, how did they view this, you know, these, ooh, thank goodness for good shields. Like, how did they view these entities? What did they say was going on? Ah, gotcha, silly Billy. You and your scummy boys are down. Like, you know what I mean? Like that's the much more important thing. Like, yeah, we could talk about, you know, if we're talking about my own personal beliefs, I could say, yes, I think that these are ultimately manifestations of something greater, or like these are ideas that are ultimately connected to something greater. But if you're just trying to just talk about like academically what's going on, that's a different thing. Like we should talk about what the people at the time believed in that case. Or, you know, for instance, like there's also this interesting book I have right here called "The Search for God in Ancient Egypt" by Jan Assman. That's a fun name, isn't it? But this is kind of talks about like the idea of like a greater God, like kind of something more like we would consider like like the Abrahamic type of God, not Abrahamic in the specific sense of like actually being connected to Abraham, but like a greater singular entity, or like, you know, a greater creator God, or like more of a pantheist type vision. It's very interesting to read about, and I think you can take some of your own theories into some of this stuff, but you do need to be careful, and you do need to remember, especially if like you're trying to just like talk to people about like for instance ancient Egypt. If we were just talking about ancient Egypt, I could talk about how I think they're part of a much greater narrative, or I could talk about how I think all of humanity is a part of a greater narrative, and that there is a sense of order there, and that there's a sense of something going on there. But then we're talking about my personal belief. Whereas if we're talking about like historically what happened, we can talk about like, you know, King Ramses, or we can talk, or, you know, like Ramses the second or whoever. We can talk about them, but we need to understand that there is a separation between like our personal belief and like academic beliefs. And I do think that's important to maintain and to understand. I mean, because I still have the personal belief, like I said, that these are all connected, but at the same time, it's like, you know, like I don't mean to demean anybody else by saying no. I understand your religion or your experience is better than you do. It's just this is what I believe. This is what makes sense to me, and I can tell you about it, and it might not make sense to you, or maybe you won't agree with me, and that's perfectly fine. We don't have to sit there and agree. I mean, I don't really aim to convert anybody. I like talking about it, and I think that it's important. I think that it can be very uplifting. But at the same time, I'm not gonna like sit here and be like, "Nah, bro, you gotta believe like me, bro. Come on, bro. Come on, bro. Crouch with me, bro." And you know, I do think it's very interesting to get into these discussions and these subjects. And you know, part of this is like ultimately, oh, they're fighting a bunch of stuff down there. But I mean, I still think ultimately you should probably do your best to try and remember that, and even when you're talking about your own personal beliefs, to keep them separate. I think that that's at least something good to think about. And I'm also just since I was on the topic, I will say that Thoth is probably my favorite Egyptian like god. And one of the things I like is that he has an ibis head, which is like a type of stork thingy. And they're kind of interesting. Apparently, they have like been around for like 60 million years, and that's kind of cool. Or I think they're genus that have been around for 60 million years, and they can live to be like 20 years old, and they like live in big flocks. I think that's pretty cool. I think these are cool birds. But yeah, I don't know. I just felt like eh, putting that out there, that we should consider other people's beliefs and understandings even when we have our own. And I mean, ultimately, the things that I believe make sense to me, and I'm not terribly concerned about, trying to explain them to other people. And sometimes it just seems like it's a better option to just be like, okay, look, it's cool that we're talking about this, but at the same time, I don't want to like really get into like a big heated debate because some people they'll start talking to you and they'll be like, at first it seems like they want to listen, but then they almost seem like they're determined to try and like prove you wrong. And it's just like, okay, let's not. That's not even really worth getting into. At least to me, it's not. Like something I do think is kind of interesting if you think about my personal beliefs with all this stuff is it would be very difficult to like make this systematized. I think you could, but you'd have to ignore a lot of it gets complicated. But anyway, I just wanted to share those thoughts this week and say hi to everybody. And yeah, I have a new account on this one. This is my non-cheaty account. I also have this. I made this lady here, and I put this on her forehead. It's very specifically supposed to be like the Vibhuti. I think I said that right. But it's like the mark that like Hindus put on their forehead in like sacred ash, and it's like to keep away evil and other things. I thought it looked cool. It's supposed to be an eye, but it's like kind of hard to see that it's an eye. Actually, wait. Nope, that doesn't. I don't think. Yep, equipment doesn't either. Okay, so it's like supposed to be an eye, so that's cool. Man, I love the rain in this game. Anyway, I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I hope you all um, have fun sharing your beliefs and having a great day. And I hope that um, God blesses all of you. And I hope that you dream of cat hugs because I will be there in your dreams trying to give you hugs, but also doing this. Okay, have a great one.